Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to the first lecture video of the second week of February. In this chapter, we will discuss theme of art, which is the chapter 3, and we will learn how to compare representations of the sacred realm and identify how works of art reflects politics and the social order, and explain the story or history represented in works of art, and describe how artists represent everyday life. So the rest we're going to talk about the next lecture. So let's dive in. One of the most common themes that you encounter when you study the history of art is you will run into this theme, which is the sacred realm. So like I mentioned a couple of times, especially during the Renaissance period, the Christian faith and the church itself, which was the really powerful entity, was the biggest patron of art. So humans have been questioning things that only can be seen through the eyes of faith. You know, the questions of who created the universe and how did life begin and what is its purpose. So even today, with all the technology that we have, I mean, we human race is not even close to these questions. You know, you try to ask Siri that question, she's not going to be able to, answer that. So many works of architecture have been created to provide settings for rituals of worship and prayer, rituals that formalize the contact between the earthly and the divine realms. So do you remember this cathedral right here on the left? We talked about this in, I think it was the chapter 1. This is Notre Dame de Paris, a French cathedral located in Paris. So we looked into this cathedral when we talked about how artists create a place of human purposes back in chapter 1. So I feel like chapter 1 and chapter 3 is kind of a similar. So just think about the chapter 1 while you're watching this lecture. It'll kind of make sense a lot better if you do that. Okay, so on the left, it is the inside of the Notre Dame de Paris. So we get to see this beautiful, beautiful Gothic architectural, it's just forming this graceful pointed arches to create this heavenly experience almost. And on the right, the west facade of the church, the entrance to the cathedral, every small part of it is carved by the hand by a master stonemasons and artists and other craftsmen. So it is an absolute masterpiece of an architecture that was created to provide a place for worship, in this case, Christian faith. Notre Dame de Paris, meaning Our Lady of Paris, is a medieval Catholic cathedral in Paris. So the cathedral is considered to be one of the finest examples of French Gothic architectural style. So in the 1790s, it suffered desecration during the French Revolution, and much of its religious artifacts were damaged or destroyed. And this cathedral's construction began in 1163 under Bishop Maurice de Sully and was completed by 1260. Though it is still going through several modifications in the following centuries. These days, there's still going like a lot of renovations and things like that. So people have been making silly images of this cathedral, such as converting the cathedral into a pool or parking garage or McDonald's and things like that. So it's just silly images of people, making fun of this church at the same time, Yeah. So one other example would be this. Saint Chapelle, a royal chapel in Gothic style within the medieval residence of the kings of France until 14th century. It's commissioned by the French king Louis IX, also known as Saint Louis, to house an important collection of relics that he had just acquired. So relics he believed to include pieces of the true cross and the crown of thrones when Christ wore when he was crucified, and other instruments of Christ's passion, which he bought from his cousin who was the king of the Byzantine Empire for an enormous sum. So this chapel was basically created to house the relics in the center part right over here. So this inside, the viewer is overwhelmed by its sheer beauty and the number of stained glass and the heavenly visual experience that it creates. And the king's architects created this soaring vertical space with the walls of stained glass, and light passing through the glass creates this dazzling effect, transforming the interior into the radiant, otherworldly space in which the glory of heaven seems close at hand almost. So I mean, just look at it. I mean, overwhelmingly beautiful. That's the only thing that I can say. And this part of the chapel is where it held the relics, by the way. And look at those stained glass. It's crazy. So the second example, painted by the 13th century Italian masters, Zimbabwe, depicts Mary, mother of the Christ, and her son, Jesus Christ. Oh, and notice how Mary is wearing blue again, like we mentioned from the last chapter. So Mary sits calmly on her throne, and her right hand indicating the Christ child, who raises his hand in a gesture of benediction. And on both sides of her are figures of angels, heavenly spirit messengers, and all wearing halos signifying their holiness. So if you take a look at the medieval paintings, not even just medieval paintings, a couple of the Renaissance paintings as well, you'll notice that the holy figures or saints have this kind of a disc or like a ray of lights around surrounding their head. So the halos are those circular objects placed on the head of the figures, and it is a crown of light rays or circle or disc of light. Excuse me. That surrounds a person in art. And it has been used in the iconography of many religions to indicate holy or sacred figures, and has at various periods also been used in images of rulers and heroes. So in this case, some argue that Jesus' halo is portrayed through the behind window of the negative space of that window. And I see where people get it, and at the same time I'm like, I'm not too sure. Anyway, here is another example that we looked before. So the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, completed in late 15th century CE. So this painting depicts the biblical scene of the Christ and his disciples having the Last Supper before his crucifixion. And it portrays the reaction given by each apostle when Jesus said one of them will betray him. And all 12 apostles have different reaction to the news, with various degrees of anger and shock. So here's an example from the other side of the world. Borobudur, the largest Buddhist temple in the world, located on the Indonesian island of Java, and it was built over a period for some 75 years in the 8th and 19th century by the kingdom of Sailendra out of estimated 2 million blocks of stone. And it was abandoned in 14th century for reasons that still remain a mystery. And for centuries, it laid hidden in the jungle under the layers of volcanic ash. So it was rediscovered while Java was under British administration from 1811 to 1816. So Lieutenant Governor General Thomas Stamford Raffles was informed about a big monument deep in the jungle near the village, and he was not able to see the site himself but sent Herman Cornelius, a Dutch engineer, to investigate. So in 2 months, Cornelius and his 200 men cut down trees and burned down vegetation around it and dug away the earth to rebuild this monument. Another example of Buddhist temple from Japan, Todaji Temple, located in the city of Nara, originally founded in the year of 738 CE. So you can see the quite a difference of stylistic approach, even though they both are Buddhist temple, right? So this is Hagia Sophia, and it was originally built as a Roman Catholic cathedral constructed in 537 CE, and now it is located in Istanbul, Turkey, and now serves as a mosque, a place for the faith of Islam. and it was converted to a mosque in 1453 after the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Empire. This is called Pantheon, and this is one of the few remaining architecture from Roman Empire. And this was a temple for ancient Greek mythology, and it is now serving as a Catholic church in Rome, Italy. And it was commissioned by Marcus Agrippa during the reign of Augustus around 27 BC to 14 CE, and the date of construction is still uncertain. And Pantheon was thought to be a temple for all gods, and this structure has a large center hole at the peak of the dome. As the sun moves around throughout the day, it highlights different statues of gods in the middle part of the building, as you can see on this painting. So yeah, you see these statues around. And some people say that the concrete they used to build this temple is stronger than the concrete that we use today, and the recipe for this particular concrete is still unknown. So I found it fascinating. I'm not sure it's true or not, but someone once told me that. So next, we're gonna look at politics and the social order. This is the second theme of art. So of the many things that we human beings create as human beings, the most basic and important may be societies. I mean, after all, we are social animal, meaning that we group together, and our chance of survival is often dependent on it. Excuse me. So throughout the history, humans formed tribes, towns, cities, countries, and empires, and now like alliances of empires. Examples of different social structures. So in many early societies, earthly order and cosmic order were viewed as interrelated and mutually dependent. So such was the case in ancient Egypt, where the pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was viewed as a link between the divine and the earthly realms. The pharaoh was considered a junior god, a personification of the god Horus and the son of the sun god Ra. Blah. There's a tongue twist right over there. Son of the sun god. Yeah. So anyway, as a ruler, his role was to maintain the divinely established order of the universe, which included the social order of Egypt, and he communed with gods in temples where only he could ever enter. And he wielded theoretically unlimited power over a country that, literally belonged to him. So when a pharaoh died, it was believed that he rejoined the gods and became fully divine. So preparation for this kind of a journey to becoming a fully divine figure began even during his lifetime, as vast tombs were constructed and it was outfitted with everything he would need to maintain his royal lifestyle in eternity. So the most famous example would be the 3 pyramids of Giza that we looked before, which served as tombs of pharaohs Menkaure, Khafre, and Khufu. And the tallest pyramid was the tallest structure for over 3,800 years until the construction of Lincoln Cathedral in 1311 in England. So the pyramids reflect the immense power of the pharaohs who could command such forces. I mean, just imagine how much manpower they'll need for this. Even today, I mean. But they also reflect the beliefs underlying the social order that granted its rulers such power in the first place. In the Egyptian view, the well-being of Egypt depended on the goodwills of the gods, whose representative on the earth was the kings, the pharaoh. His safe passage to the afterlife and his worship thereafter as a god himself were essential for the prosperity of the country and the continuity of the universe, so that no amount of labor or spending seemed too great to achieve these kind of things. Crazy. So one of the good examples from the ancient Roman Empire is this bronze statue of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So this is few surviving bronze sculptures. The reason why I say that is bronze sculptures, when cities gets conquered, it gets melted down for like a precious metal, because bronze is precious metal. But this is one of the few surviving bronze sculpture from the ancient Greek times. So in this sculpture, you are seeing the Marcus Aurelius, known as the Wise King or the Philosopher King. And he is seated on his mount, and he extends his arm in an eloquent gesture as if he's delivering a speech. And his calm in victory contrasts with the spirited motion of his horse, which was originally shown raising his hoof over a fallen enemy, but now it has gone. So Roman fashion for beard, come and go as like most other fashions. But the emperor's beard seems very significant, and it was the way that he wanted to be portrayed. The beard were associated with Greek philosophers, and Marcus Aurelius' beard signals his desire to be seen as philosopher king, which it was his ideal, and he genuinely tried to live up to. He was a good king, by the way. So this is an example we looked before. Eugene Delacroix' Liberty Leading the People is a painting commemorating the July Revolution of 1830, which toppled King Charles X of France during the French Revolution. So this painting commemorates the resilience of the people of the France and their triumph against the tyranny. Through this painting, you're now looking at the birth of democracy, and the democracy that we know today. So Delacroix completed the painting in the very same year, and it retains the passion of his idealized view of the insurrection and the hopes he had for the future the revolution would bring. So at the center is Liberty herself, personified as a Greek statue come to life, holding the French flag high, which was the flag to represent the French Revolution. And she rallies the citizens of Paris, who surge toward the viewer, us, wielding pistols and sabers as though about to burst out of the painting. All right, let's take a look at this example. This is a painting called Guernica, and this is considered as one of the most famous painting of all time. And this is painted by our dear friend Pablo Picasso. So let's take a look. Actually, it's two videos. I'm going to cut it in the middle and then move on to the next video. So first video, they're going to talk about what inspired him to create this painting. And then the second video is going to talk about, it's going to break down each elements of the painting. So that's the inspiration of Picasso's painting. It was the Spanish Civil War, and this video is going to break down the painting one by one.
On April the 26th, 1937, fascist forces bombed the Basque village of Guernica in northern Spain. It was one of the worst civilian casualties of the Spanish Civil War, waged between the Democratic Republic and General Franco's fascist contingent. For Pablo Picasso, the tragedy sparked a frenzied period of work in which he produced a massive anti-war mural, aptly titled Guernica. The painting is a powerful work of historical documentation and political protest. But while Picasso's artistic motivations are clear, the symbolism of the painting can be as confusing and chaotic as war itself. How can we make sense of this overwhelming image? And what exactly makes it a masterpiece of anti-war art? The painting's monumental canvas is disorienting from the start, rendered in the abstracted Cubist style Picasso pioneered. Cubism deliberately emphasized the two-dimensionality of the canvas by flattening the objects being painted. This afforded viewers multiple and often impossible perspectives on the same object, a technique considered shocking even in Picasso's domestic scenes. But in this context, the style offers a profoundly overwhelming view of violence, destruction, and casualties. Multiple perspectives only compound the horror on display, sending the eyes hurtling around the frame in a futile hunt for peace. On the far left, a woman holding her dead child releases a scream, her eyes sliding down her face in the shape of tears and her head bending back unnaturally to echo her baby's. There is a statue of a soldier present below, but he is unable to defend the woman and child. Instead, his broken body lies in pieces, his arm clutching a splintered sword in a signal of utmost defeat. The tip of his sword meets a woman's foot as she attempts to flee the devastation, but her other leg appears rooted to the spot, locked in the corner of the canvas, even as she stretches to move it. Another victim appears behind this slouching figure, falling helplessly as flames lick around her. She too is caught in her own hopeless scene. Each of these figures bordering the painting are horribly trapped, giving the work an acute sense of claustrophobia. And where you might expect the canvas's massive size to counteract this feeling, its scale only highlights the nearly life-sized atrocities on display. Some possible relief comes from a lamp held tightly by a ghostly woman reaching out her window. But is her lantern's hopeful glow truly lighting the scene? Or is it the jagged light bulb, thought to represent the technologies of modern warfare, which illuminates her view of the chaos below? From the coffin-like confines of her window, her arm guides the viewer back into the fray to perhaps the most controversial symbols of all: two ghostly animals caught in the destruction. Does the screaming horse embody the threat of Franco's military nationalism, or does the spike running through its body convey its victimhood? Does the white bull represent Spain, the country of matadors, and a common theme in Picasso's work, or does it stand for the brutality of war? In this scene of strife, these animals raise more questions than answers, and additional elements hidden throughout the frame offer even more secrets for close observers. At the top of the canvas flashes a bird desperate to escape the carnage. And the abundance of animals on display may hint at the bombing's date, a market day which flooded the streets with villagers, animals, and other potential casualties. Like the bombing of Guernica itself, Picasso's painting is dense with destruction, but hidden beneath this supposed chaos are carefully crafted scenes and symbols carrying out the painting's multifaceted attack on fascism. Decades after its creation, Guernica retains its power to shock viewers and ignite debate, and is often referenced at anti-war gatherings around the world. Hundreds of viewers have grappled with its harsh imagery, shattering symbolism, and complex political messaging. But even without a close understanding of its complicated subtext, Picasso's work remains a searing reminder of the true casualties of violence. Interested in learning more about art history? Check out.
Right. So that's Pablo Picasso's Guernica.
This playlist.
Alright, let's move on to the next theme of art, which is stories and histories. So you probably remember the six functions of art. So one of them was to record and commemorate. So this is kind of a similar topic here. Whoa, sorry. So art itself is a communication, is a visual communication, and it involves information, and it delivers through different interactions such as vision, mostly vision, but these days sound and etc. Other sensories, but mostly vision, especially when you're talking about the paintings of, like 14th century. So throughout the history, art was often used to tell stories and histories of heroes and lives of saints and religious episodes and kings and important figures and things like that. So one of the genre of painting that was considered to be the most noble form of painting was history painting. So they were traditionally regarded as the highest form of Western painting and occupying the most prestigious place in the hierarchy of genres and considered the equivalent to the epic in literature. So the term history painting was first introduced in the 17th century to describe paintings with subject matter drawn from classical history, mythology, and of course, the Bible. So this guy right here on the left, he is Nicolas Poussin, and he was the leading painter of the classical French Baroque style and one of the most well-known history painter. The death of Germanicus, 1627, now resides at Minneapolis Institution of Art. So the young Roman general Germanicus has just been poisoned by his jealous father, the Emperor Tiberius. On his deathbed, Germanicus asked his friends to avenge his murder and his wife to endure her sorrow bravery, which is a key work in Western painting. This tragic picture presents a moral lesson in Stoic heroism, notably in the restraint and dignity of the mourning soldiers. So this work became the model for countless deathbed scenes for the next 2 centuries. So many powerful human themes figures are here. So death, suffering, injustice, grief, loyalty, revenge. It's very strong emotions. And Poussin drew on the Roman antiquity for the form as well as the subject. The composition with figures crowded together near the front is based on Roman sarcophagus reliefs. Poussin spent most of his life in Rome, where he developed a classical style that strongly influenced both French and Italian art later on. And notice how he's using the light so well. It looks like there's just one light source coming from the left to the right, and the figure is evenly lit through by the light. And the way he designed his composition and lighting is through that he uses like a small light box. I think it's quite interesting to look at. So just let's take a look at it, quickly.
The reason for making the box is because Poussin used to try to make the composition as a little stage set first, and then make the drawings. The box is made out of sweet chestnut. There's an eye hole at one end, and then there's 2 sliding doors on either side with brass plates over them, and then one on the rooftop as well. So that acts as the lighting, the kind of stage lighting.
I'm Sian Lewis, I'm an artist. I worked with the fabric, the use of silk.
So Poussin stages his scene using this kind of a light box, and then he manipulates the light to create this, to get a sense of how he's going to create his paintings.
Of modelling, up in your hand.
We're setting up the figures, introducing them onto the board one by one to build up the scene.
That was one of the fun things, is actually deciding who's important and who's less important, and then progressively taking away those figures.
Yeah, and the
I just thought that it was an interesting way of creating a composition.
dynamics between.
So another example of history painting is come from the Jacques-Louis David, the guy who painted the example that we looked at, the painting of Napoleon crossing the Alps. And this painting is Oath of Horatii, created in 1784. Now resides in the Louvre Museum. You can see the influence of Poussin in here as well. Through David, during the time called the Enlightenment, a style called Neoclassicism was developed. So in the 7th century BC, to put an end to the bloody war between Rome and Alba, both cities designated champions. So the former chose the Horatii and the latter the Curiatii. So the two families were linked by marriage, and Jacques-Louis David depicts the Horatii swearing to death their enemies or die for their country. But on the right, the grief-stricken woman of the family already feared the worst, and the Sabina, the sister of the Curiatii and wife of the eldest of the Horatii, and Camilla, the sister of the Horatii and betrothed to one of the Curiatii, hang their heads in the sorrow, while behind them the mother of the Horatii hugs her grandchildren. Oof. Confusing. Did I say it right? Horatii? Yeah. So this video goes in depth of the Jacques-Louis David's Oath of the Horatii. So let's take a look at it. 6 minutes.
We're standing in one of the largest galleries in the Louvre in Paris. It's filled with enormous paintings. We're looking at Jacques-Louis David's Oath of the Horatii. This is a painting that was made in 1784 and exhibited in 1785. And this painting stole the show. It was absolutely new. Nobody had ever seen anything like it.
The prevailing style in France was the Rococo. We could think about artists like Boucher or Fragonard, a style that appealed to the aristocracy.
And even in the kind of history painting that was made for the king, the style had become formulaic. It had become tired. But David's Oath of the Horatii establishes a new style that we call neoclassicism.
Critics like Diderot are calling for an art that depicts virtuous behavior, very different from the prevailing Rococo style. And this painting answers that call.
This is the tail end of the period in France that we call the Enlightenment, with philosophers like Rousseau, Diderot, and Voltaire, who posit the idea that the rational should supersede tradition and the spiritual.
The church was incredibly powerful. The monarchy in France was incredibly powerful. And the philosophers of the Enlightenment are asking questions about the validity of these very established institutions.
And remember, it will only be a few years before the French Revolution begins.
Right, this is exhibited in 1785. The Revolution is 1789.
And the American Revolution has already taken place, based in large part on the ideas of French Enlightenment philosophers.
We have a story from early ancient Roman history.
The early Roman state is at war with the neighboring city of Alba.
But instead of the armies of each side going to war, they decide to send 3 brothers from each side to battle it out. Whoever survives is the side that's victorious.
The Romans choose the Horatii, and the city of Alba chooses the Quaratii.
But things get very complicated because there are intermarriages between these two families. So no matter who wins,
both sides will lose.
Exactly.
What we see is the father of the Horatii holding swords aloft as the sons take an oath to battle to the death.
For Rome.
On the right, we see 3 women and 2 children. There's some disagreement as to who the woman in blue is in the back.
We see 2 young women in the foreground.
Okay, so that's Jacques-Louis David's Oath of Horatii.
One of them is a...
Let's take a look at some modern examples of this histories and stories. So Judith Baca and her team of artists share their interest in recording history. Using the concrete walls of a drainage canal, Baca's Great Wall of Los Angeles is a half-mile long history of the era from prehistory to the 20th century. So the goal of this ongoing project is to represent the histories of the diverse population of LA who are underrepresented in history books and school curricula. So Baca collaborates with historians and other artists to picture events that have received little attention but deeply affect people's lives. So the scene shown here represents the roles of Asians and Latinos on the frontier in the 19th century, and it also pictures how 1848 treaty brought California and other western and southwestern territories into the United States, splitting the region's Latino population. I think this work of art is very interesting. It's very different to the examples that we looked at. So Jacques-Louis David's painting was kept in private, whereas this work of art, not only this is a modern work of art, this is presented in a public space for public view. So I think there's a really big difference there. As you can see, this is a half-mile long depiction of important events that affected the human lives that we know of today. I think it's very powerful and interesting and empowering work of art. Notice how her and her team is focusing on underrepresented people. Yeah, so I think this is very so I'll leave the link of this video in the Moodle section, so if you want to take a look at it, go take a look at it. I think it's a very interesting work of art. So in the next lecture, we're gonna take a look at the rest of the chapter 3. So go and finish reading the chapter 3 for this week, and I'll see you guys on the Wednesday evening.